Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, a new commission, a new head of the team running cloud policy in the European Commission. You have had presentations to you at previous versions of this conference, so I'm not going to dwell too much on the past, but really look at what is the situation now and where we are going. I'm going to talk briefly about how we have been implementing our cloud strategy. I want to have, obviously, a particular reference to the role and the focus on public sector organizations in that strategy, including some of the innovation actions, the research and procurement policies that we tried to put in place to facilitate and to create best practice examples for procurement of cloud services. And then, as has just been said, moving on to where we are going with our policies in the foreseeable future, with a new commission, with an emphasis, a renewed emphasis on the digital single market and how we can kick on from the policy achievements that we have made so far. I think, first of all, it's probably useful to go that way. No. Just to put this in economic context. Some of the headline figures that we are working from at the moment, which, by the way, have been revised since we launched our cloud strategy 2.5 years ago, including, in some cases, revising the figures downwards as we become more honest, more realistic. And we're giving what we see as a variant, or rather two figures, for what we think could be the significant contribution that cloud can make across the European economy. It's very important to stress that this is including with regard to the uptake of cloud services in the public sector. And in terms of GDP or job creation, the variation or the reasons or the difference between those optimistic and pessimistic scenarios is actually the success of our policies and government and local and regional policies to encourage uptake of cloud and to remove barriers to cloud uptake, including, as we will see and has been mentioned already this morning, significant issues of trust around security, data protection, etc. We have done recent survey work which has shown that up to 60% of all businesses have at least one cloud-based solution. However, when you dig into those figures, it's not as impressive as that by any means, because in some cases we're talking simply about access to a cloud email solution, which isn't really the level of sophistication which we aspire to when it comes to cloud services. And I think it's important that we look at this from the perspective of public organizations, because public administrations can have easier access to a whole suite of state-of-the-art technologies and at a lower cost. We heard this morning about the cost, which is in terms of money, of course, but also in terms of time and efficiency, which reduces budget expenditure, increases the efficiency of cloud service, and has a significant knock-on effect to citizens, but also to businesses, including SMEs, in the wider economy, which is why we have to focus significantly and have done so in our strategy. I'll just put up this slide. I think one of my colleagues may have shown an earlier version of this last year or the year before. Partly it's our report card on how we have done progress so far, but it's the basis on which we're then analysing as to where we're going next. Our cloud strategy from 2.5 years ago had three main pillars. We had a series of initiatives, and I want to stress, given the criticisms I've already heard about the European Union this morning, that all of these were in the form of co-regulatory action, or in fact most of them self-regulation, working with industry, working with public sector organisations to develop best practices, codes of conduct and standard terms which could be used by the industry but also by buyers, by procurers, adapting them to specific sector needs and ensuring that we were not, well, ensuring not only that we were not creating further red tape or inflexibility, but actually helping to break down barriers and increasing and improving flexibility with, as you would imagine in this area, a huge self-referencing to whether or not what we were doing was future-proof and technology neutral, because the cloud technologies and the suite of data services that are available are evolving rapidly, some of which arise out of our own research actions. Just one particular focus from the work that we did in creating a European Cloud Partnership, that was very significant because it was based on public sector and private sector organisation participation, a group of wise people acting ex officio who were tasked to give us advice with regard to where we needed to go in terms of our own policies on cloud. And that partnership had a steering board. It was actually chaired by the president of Estonia and had several representatives of public sector organizations who issued a Trusted Cloud Europe report. The wording, the choice of words, and even the placing of those words was significantly detailed, because we have been striving to remove any suggestion that what we are seeking to create is a European cloud, i.e. a cloud which is cut off from the rest of the world. The cloud is an international global service, and we want all of the European economy to be exposed to the most innovative developments at international level. But we want cloud to actually spread across Europe. And so the ECP gave us a report which set out a series of issues that needed to be addressed. Before I talk about those, there's also the other element, which is actually facilitating uptake in the public sector through initiatives for public sector innovation. And in that, we have the Cloud for Europe project, which is currently actually running a tender, and whose purpose is, through pilot actions, to help prepare public sector for procuring cloud and avoiding lock-in, and creating synergies across borders within Europe in order to ensure that we do have best practice for public procurement. This is not an attempt to duplicate or to replace initiatives, best-in-class initiatives such as G-Cloud. It's actually using the lessons from such schemes at a European level, but also once governments and public administrations have matured into the sort of environment which you are now discussing today with regard to the United Kingdom, then seeing if we can be more sophisticated so that specific sets of public sector buyers in specific areas, whether it's health, education, or any other specific application, can actually find synergies in procurement and actually be quicker to roll out technologies as cloud solutions in their area of responsibility by working with agencies in other member states who have the same tasks. We have another initiative, which is another innovation and procurement initiative, which is to create a platform for European procurers, particularly with regard to procurement, cloud procurement for the public sector, and innovative technologies being actually implemented by groups of partners from across member states. Again, this is a set of pilot actions. It is to create the platform, to create best practice. It is to allow you, the users, the buyers, to meet together with suppliers to find the most agile ways of ensuring efficient procurement, identifying your real needs, and supplying the technical solutions. We have now, under our research program, that's Horizon 2020 is the name that we give it now, a call which is currently open, which actually focuses in greater detail on the needs of the public sector with regard to the procurement of cloud solutions. We have it in two parts, but it does recognize the huge benefits which cloud computing can have for the public sector, as I said, but also in the knock-on effect which that can have in the wider economy. And it's very interesting to hear the discussion that's just taken place about the fact that innovative procurement systems for cloud can create a level playing field, despite teething problems, for SMEs, which is again one of the other major economic targets of the new European Commission in ensuring growth and competitiveness across the European economy. In that call, which is currently open, the call for proposals, the deadline is in mid-April. We are looking at both pre-commercial procurement, and we want consortia across the member states to, again, lead with examples of identifying problems or procurement needs, cloud needs, and then having rapid research into what solutions can be applied. Downstream of that, we're at the same time looking for public procurement of innovative cloud solutions, which is actually then implementing these innovative solutions in a public sector environment, which means working closely with private sector suppliers to implement those solutions, which can then, of course, be scaled across Europe as a whole. Going back to the policy side of things, and I apologize if that slide is actually too small to read, but probably just as well, because I don't want to go into this level of detail. I do want to highlight two things, which is that, again, we have actions which identify the need for best practice, which need to work with stakeholders, as we call them, but particularly with public sector purchasers and private sector suppliers, as well as identifying wider needs from industry bodies, from other organizations, including consumer groups, in order to tackle the problem of trust in the cloud. And this, of course, means that we also have to look very critically at the actions that we have taken so far with regard to action in the cloud area ourselves. I would just also mention that in talking about best practice, the Commission is itself trying to practice what it preaches. So just after Christmas, we launched the first major call for offers, a procurement call from the European Commission itself as a major user of IT services on behalf of all of the European institutions, which I know many in this room, given the audience, given the country I'm speaking in, many of you think is much too big, but there you are. As a result of being much too big, we are also a large IT user. And it is an attempt to quickly roll out IT cloud solutions, which we are procuring from the private sector, and to scale up that activity significantly over the next 2 years. It is also, and it gives us an insight into the practicalities of doing such an exercise. And once again, we, just like many public sector buyers, have come across the biggest barrier being that of trust and security, and therefore your own security or legal department might be the ones who want to put the brakes on any attempt to move into the public cloud procurement space. So we have a series of actions that the report that was issued to us from this group, the European Cloud Partnership, of high-level CEOs and government representatives as to further actions that we could take. Once again, the emphasis being on self-regulation, on working with all of the interested parties to find what best solutions to ensure that we're not putting anything into regulation which would be immediately out of date. We then tested that with a large-scale consultation of our stakeholders, and we had some very interesting feedback, which was putting this very much in the center of what has now become our key political task this year in 2015 in the European Commission, which is creating the digital single market, completing that single market for digital services, and to address some of the issues which are a major barrier for purchasers, for CIOs, be they in public or private sector organizations or companies, from actually adopting cloud on a wide scale, which is to ensure that the suppliers are compliant, that the compliance obligations which any CIO or company or public sector organization has can be guaranteed, and that there is a high level of surety in the services that they are offering. There's a very political debate going on about data sovereignty, but the focus of our work is actually in relation to barriers that exist with regard to the freedom of movement of data and data services, so that we can have one marketplace in Europe, which will mean that the most interesting and innovative offers will be the ones that can win out in a competitive situation across Europe to make sure that Europe as a whole benefits from innovative cloud services. So we clearly have more to do. The new Commission, which came into office on the 1st of November, has clearly stated not just the digital single market as its priority, but also the provision of trusted cloud services as well as IoT services and big data as one of their key priorities. We have to address the issue of risk and the issue of trust in the services being able to overcome those risks. And that is why we need to look at the barriers to uptake when the economic proposition is very clearly there. The advantages on the supply side and the advantages on the demand side are evident. What we must do is ensure that the barriers, or the issues which inhibit cloud uptake, are actually going to be addressed. So therefore, we are looking in a short space of time to, as part of an overall initiative in the digital single market, to address some of the problems that were identified for us by the Trusted Cloud Europe report. Policy measures which will be market-led, which will identify those issues that need to be addressed by regulation, if any. For example, what I've just spoken about, barriers to free movement of data, where in some cases member states have laws which prevent organizations from availing of services, cloud services, unless they can guarantee or be assured that the data will stay within the jurisdiction of that member state. In many cases, that is an overprotective measure. Clearly, there are certain sets of data which do need to be protected, but there is a vast majority of data that, certainly if it has been pseudonymized, can be allowed to move to wherever is the most economic data center or storage space available. But to conclude, in that initiative, some of the issues that we are currently addressing for the whole set of data services which are essential to growth and innovation in the European economy are those restrictions on data location. To further improve and expand the work that we have been doing with industry on certification, which addresses security, data protection certainly, but perhaps other issues, and to link that with work that we need to do and to continue on interoperability and data portability. One of the key objectives that this Commission has also set for itself is to ensure that there is not artificial or anti-competitive lock-in, and there may be the need for further standardization to ensure that there are APIs, interfaces, which will allow data to be ported when the data owner wants that to be the case, or when you quite simply, in a procurement process or otherwise, change supplier. That's an essential part of making the European digital market more flexible and ensuring that we have take-up of services. So thank you for your time, and we would like to thank you for your attention.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Owen Jennings from Data Centred. We're a UK startup cloud provider. One of my questions, we've been involved in some European initiatives in cloud and also are a participant in G-Cloud. One of my questions is what emphasis are you giving to SMEs? SMEs have been a very big part of G-Cloud and a success story here. Europe, I'm not getting that same vibe. Is that?
I think it's a fair question. We too have been concerned about that. The instruments that we have put in place, which, as I have described, don't seek to in themselves solve all of the problems, but in many cases to create pilot actions or simply to identify best practice, they were intended to extend and to apply to SMEs as much as to large suppliers. But we have found in reality that those who are most responsive and most resourced, best resourced to respond to the sort of work that we have been doing have, in many to a certain extent, have been major suppliers. So alongside the actions which I just put up on the screen, which are innovative actions, the Cloud for Europe and PIXE, which are the names of the two, we actually have now developed specific, what we call support actions, which are geared especially at SMEs, which seek to create platforms of SME providers, and will then in the second stage seek also to bring together SMEs as users, which is perhaps a slightly different dynamic, but something that is also very important for the uptake of cloud in the wider economy. But in the first phase, focusing on SMEs who are suppliers of cloud services, largely but not entirely in platform and software, but also in some cases in infrastructure, so that they can respond and be as effective in integrating themselves into the initiatives that we take with regard to procurement. But I want to be clear that, nor would you expect us, the European Commission is not trying to become the mass procurer of cloud services for everybody else. What we are doing is trying to help and to build on, for example, G-Cloud and other experiments and other services in other countries in order to make that best practice the norm across the European Union. And we still have a way to go to ensure, but it is our clear vocation to ensure that SMEs are a full part of that. The larger companies can look after themselves. It's the SMEs who are a huge part. This is what our data shows us. SMEs are a huge part of the cloud supplier market, and they need to be assisted, particularly when it comes to providing services across borders. That's what we do. It is the value added in terms of the cross-border and the single market in Europe that we have to focus on, and SMEs are the ones who encounter the greatest barriers to actually offer their sometimes niche services to similar users in other countries.
Yeah, you mentioned cloud standards. I wasn't sure whether what your ambitions are, whether it's sort of communicating them, recommending them, imposing them, creating new ones. Mm-hmm. What are you doing?
We would only create new ones as a last resort, so I think I can answer that last part of your question first. Yes, in relation to, we had a group called the Cloud Select Industry Group, which was a group of suppliers advising us. This is how I said we work with industry in all of the measures that I put up on the board under the cloud strategy. And in the standardization work, it was clear that what we wanted to do was to identify what were the standards applicable and identify any gaps which the standardization bodies working with industry would need to address. Our focus was at a first stage with the standardization body ETSI, so we were dealing more with technical standards. And now we have moved on to what I would call, very inaccurately probably, business process standards, working more at the ISO level to ensure that they are up to date, that they are recognized, and that they are used. And again, as a last resort, seeing if we need to mandate one of the standardization bodies in cases where there's quite obviously a standard missing. But we may now come back to the standardization issue specifically in the case of interoperability and data portability if we do not find that industry is providing those solutions. And here, it is not quite the same question as I've just answered about SMEs, but we do know that there are a certain number of major suppliers whose technology does, to a certain extent, create a proprietorial lock-in. And that is not healthy for a market which strives to be as flexible as possible and to provide the procurer, the buyer, with a choice of services on a regular basis. So that's where we may come back. No decisions have been taken. We are always very reluctant to ourselves get into the standard space because we are not the experts. We would leave that to the standardization bodies who work directly with industry.
Okay, and with that, to thank Pearse O'Donohue. Pearse, thank you very much indeed for a very informative talk. Thank you.